Rav Saadia Gaon.
So Rav Saadia, sorry?
Yes.
Rav Saadia Gaon was born in Egypt, the year 892. He went to Bavel to learn. It's unclear at what age. We don't know a whole lot about his youth. We know that by the age of 20, he's already publishing. He learns in the yeshiva in Surah. And in a very short time, I mean, he passes away, if I remember correctly, in the year 942. He's 50 years old. But he becomes this real giant across the world of halacha, Tanakh, machshava, Jewish thought. He becomes somebody who everybody has to answer to.
And so the influence of Rav Saadia Gaon, even in his lifetime, was prominent. Yes,
Rav Saadia Gaon was dominant even in his day, and even before he was a Gaon, he was already very well known. He was a leader of the charge in his day against Karaism. Without going into great depth on the Karaites, they questioned rabbinic authority in many ways. So he weighed in with philosophical writings. Ha'amunot v'hadeot is his major philosophical work, but he also wrote other philosophical writings against the ideas of the Karaites, as well as against other foreign philosophies. There was a fellow named Chivi Habalki who published, I think it was about 200 questions challenging the Torah. And he wrote a response in rhyme against the questions of Chivi Habalki. He wrote responsa, he wrote piyutim, he wrote a dictionary of sorts for people who wanted to compose religious poetry. He built up the yeshiva in Surah in terms of its appeal to people at a time when it was in crisis, when people were relying less on the yeshiva. He was extremely dominant. I don't know if you want to talk about the calendar controversy of his day.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so this is actually before he becomes Gaon. There was a fellow by the name of Aharon ben Meir who was in Israel, and he claimed the title of Gaon in the yeshiva in Israel. He claimed to descend actually from the Davidic line, from the house of Hillel, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and he's a scholar. And he takes on the calendar of his day. And in order to understand his challenge to the calendar, you need to know a little bit about the way the halachic calendar works. The halachic hour is divided into 1,080 chalakim. Each chalak, a little more than 3 seconds. That's going to matter in a bit, so keep that piece of information in mind. There is a time each month called the molad. That's supposed to be the time when the moon enters its new phase at its conjunction with the sun, when the earth, the moon, and the sun are all in a straight line. That's not actually the time of the molad, but we don't need to go there in order for this to be clear. What we do need to know is that when the Chachamim set up a fixed calendar, such that we no longer work with observation of the moon, but rather I can open up my luach and know this is when it's going to be. I can go online to a website and know when Pesach is going to be 10 years from now. When they decided to do that, they created certain rules that are necessary for the good functioning of our calendar. One of those rules is Rosh Hashanah cannot start on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. We want to avoid Hoshana Rabbah being on Shabbos. We want to avoid Yom Kippur being on a Friday or a Sunday. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah cannot start on Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. That's one thing that you need to know. The other piece of information is that it's supposed to take 6 hours from the moon's conjunction, the time we're calling the molad, until the moon is visible, right? When the moon is in line, Earth, moon, sun, you aren't going to be able to see the moon. The moon has to shift out of line in order for you to be able to see it. So it's supposed to take 6 hours for that to happen. Because of that, you're never going to have witnesses show up saying, we just saw the moon at the molad. That can't be. Witnesses can't show up for the first 6 hours. Therefore, if the molad occurs after midday, the moon will not be visible until after sunset, 6 hours later. those who are paying close attention will realize we've just blended lunar hours and solar hours, right? The 6 hours about the traveling, like, I'm not going to worry about that right now. The moon will not be visible until after sunset. Therefore, if the molad is after midday, Rosh Chodesh can't happen that day. Rosh Chodesh is going to be postponed until the next night. And that's a statement in the Gemara. So we have two rules. Number one, Rosh Hashanah won't start Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. Number two, if this conjunction time, the molad, is after midday, we push Rosh Chodesh to the next day. Combining those two rules, if the molad for the month of Tishrei, the start of Tishrei, occurs on Tuesday afternoon, so theoretically Rosh Hashanah should then be Wednesday, but we don't want it to be on Wednesday, so we push Rosh Hashanah to Thursday. If the molad for the Tishrei moon happens on Thursday afternoon, Rosh Hashanah will not be Friday, Rosh Hashanah will be pushed to Shabbos. And the key for us, if the molad for Tishrei happens on Shabbos afternoon, Rosh Hashanah will be pushed all the way to Monday. So what happened was, in the year 4681 of our calendar, 921 in the general calendar, it was anticipated that the year 4684, in other words, September, the year 923, would have that 2-day postponement, because the molad of Tishrei was 13 or 14 minutes after midday on Shabbos. So Ben Meir said, you're doing it wrong. If the molad is at midday. It's if the molad is 642 chalakim. I told you the chalakim would be important. 642 chalakim afternoon. 642 chalakim, I think, is about 35 minutes. So if the molad is after 35 minutes after midday, then Rosh Hashanah is postponed. But they're projecting it to be only 13 or 14 minutes after midday. Therefore, it should not be postponed. And he argues that that pending Rosh Hashanah should not be moved. Now, where did he end up with this idea? How did he get 642 halakim? There are a lot of different explanations that are offered. One explanation that's offered is he simply didn't like rabbinic postponements. Don't mess with the calendar so much. Another is he was upset that they're doing this out of Bavel. Israel is supposed to be the place that sets the calendar. That's the way it was in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishnah, they talk about it. So he says we should be doing this in Israel. So the Geonim are in an uproar, and they're trying to prevent him from creating a schism among the Jewish people. And to make a long story short, the job falls to Rav Saadia to write a memorial volume, essentially, of which we have fragments, documenting the dispute and the deeds of this fellow Ben Meir and the responses of the Geonim, and warning the entire Jewish world, we are not going to change what we're doing. He is incorrect and he's out of line. One of the reasons Rav Saadia is so motivated by this is because saying we don't want the rabbis messing with the calendar sounds very Karaite. It is a Karaite type of idea, and that really gets Rav Saadia Gaon.